What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to review the SONY SS-CS5 Bookshelf Speakers, part of their core lineup. Now, these have been out for a while, and everyone knows their MSRP is like 200 bucks. Usually a few times a year, we see them go down under $100. I bought these off of Amazon for $98. So they present a lot of value, and everyone's reviewed them, given them a lot of praise. I think it was Jay and Audioholics both used the word unicorn in their title. That got me really curious. I'm all for budget stuff, but I'm like generally not a big believer in like cheaper stuff outperforming more expensive gear. And I generally believe you get what you pay for, but I got curious. I figured $98 wasn't a lot of money, so I ordered a pair so we could find out. Now, just to be clear, that's not to say that I don't trust Jay or Audioholics or whoever else reviewed these speakers. It's just under $100 is not a lot of money. I mean, it's one thing if they'd be sold manufacturer direct, but they're not. I had my doubts. I got a pair. We're going to get to it. We'll do this review the same way we generally do. I'll throw the main specs on screen so you guys can check that out. Damn, I'm sitting real close to my rack. I'll tell you about some standout features I care about. The rest you can just read on the screen. I'll tell you what they sound like. We'll do some comparisons. And I'll answer the question, like, are these a unicorn or not, in my opinion? And then we'll wrap up the video. So, standout features, obviously, this is going to be a three-way design. We've got what looks like, I don't know, a 6-inch, maybe, driver down here. We got what looks like a 1-inch silk dome tweeter in the middle, and a smaller 0.75 silk dome tweeter up top. Is it a three-way? Is it a two-way with two tweeters? I'm not really sure, honestly, and I don't really care. All I generally care about is what the product sounds like. I don't so much care about the mumbo-jumbo technicalities and design and things like that. But it is a rear-ported speaker. Now back, you've got a pair of five-way binding posts, sorry. By the way, what's the fifth binding option? Does anyone know? I've always been able to count like 4. Like there's bare wire, there's bananas, there's spades. Man, I can only count 3, honestly. What are the other 2? Does anyone know what makes them 5 ways? I've wondered this forever and a day. Comment below. Anyways, so there's not a lot of standout features aside from the fact that like you're getting a speaker pair for anywhere from $100 to $200 that's built reasonably well for the money. They are fairly light when you pick them up, but they don't feel necessarily cheap, and they don't look necessarily cheap either. I had them in my listening room down here, as you could see. I also had them upstairs in my living room for TV duty for a little bit to test them out there. They performed flawlessly in that kind of configuration, but let's just jump into the listening impressions. What the hell do these sound like? And what is it that reviewers love about these speakers so much? So starting at the top, we've got a treble region that's a little bit on the forward side of neutral, but it's incredibly refined for the money. And I think this is where we're beginning to see why reviewers love these speakers so much. Most reviewers have speakers that are a lot more expensive. For example, the speakers I listen to the most are the Bucard S400 Mark IIs. Those are $2,000. I also have the Canta #1s here by Focal. Those are $8,000 a pair. So we're really, really spoiled, especially in the treble region. But the SONY SS-CS5s, look, I'm not saying they sound like our $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 speakers, but they are very refined for the money, shockingly so. The most refined, I'd say the most refined sound I've heard for $100, no doubt. $200, there starts to become some competition there. But these are still, I mean, even at full price, the treble is pretty darn good. So it's going to be refined. It's a little bit on the forward side of neutral. And what that's going to give you is a whole lot of effortless clarity. If you watch Zero Fidelity's review of this speaker, the first review, not the follow-up, he talks about that effortless clarity. And that was one of the first things I noticed. These are absolutely low volume champions. You've got tons of detail at the lower volumes. If you're listening to say 70 dB late night, these are still going to sound absolutely fantastic and crystal clear at those lower volumes. You could still turn them up, but these do seem to be happier at lower volumes, say 80 dB and below. I did push mine to like 85, 87 dB, and they were able to handle it just fine. But they went from sounding amazing to just like okay. They didn't like fall apart or distort or anything like that though. So look, the treble is not going to have a crazy amount of micro detail. Obviously, it's not going to have a crazy amount of instrument separation like you would expect from something like $700, $800, $900 a pair. but for $100 to $200 a pair, this is some of the best treble I've heard. It's in no way offensive. It's not harsh. It's not rough around the edges. In fact, it's very easy to listen to, yet rewards you with a decent amount of detail, especially at this price point. Moving down to the mid-range, I think this is another area where the speaker wins. It's open, it's expansive. It's not going to be voiced on the warm side of neutral, nor is it going to be like really cool or recessed. It's fairly just neutral. There's not a lot going on in the mid-range. I did notice this was one area where the speaker, you could tell it wasn't like a $500 or $1,000 pair of speakers. Vocalists still sounded fantastic. They still imaged really well. They still had a good amount of air and space around them for what you would expect in this price point. And they still projected into the room nicely. But they didn't have that like real in-your-face feeling like more expensive speakers can pull off. Like I wasn't able to close my eyes and convince myself a singer was really in the room or anything like that. But they were still incredibly good. The odd thing, and Sean mentions this in his video too, at least the follow-up video, is they will show off poorer, that's a hard word to say, poor recordings, let's just say that. If your recordings aren't that great, or they got some imperfections in them, these speakers will show that off a little bit, and that really did take me by surprise, because generally speakers around this price are not going to be that resolving. And again, they didn't have the most micro detail, so I wasn't getting like a crazy amount of detail retrieval to expect them to be a little bit non-forgiving on poor source material, but it is what it is. Moving down to the bass, this is a small speaker and it's an affordable speaker. It has enough bass for the music to sound full or correct, but a subwoofer is going to be absolutely mandatory if you're looking for that full range experience. The bass isn't particularly, tight or quick or have killer detail or transient response. It's just okay. But again, I paid $98. These are, in my book, they're a huge win for $100. I think they're even a huge win at their current price right now. I checked before filming this video. Amazon was selling them for $149. I can't think of a speaker that's as good for the money. And I do have the ELAC BS41s here. Those are about the same price. I think those are on Amazon right now are $169. So let's jump into comparisons and talk about how these compare to other speakers in and around this price range. So these versus the ELAC BS41s. I haven't reviewed those yet, but I will in a future video. The ELAC BS41s are going to be built to a little bit of a higher standard, not a whole lot, but they do feel just a little bit more robust in the hand. We do the little knock test that's not scientific at all. They will feel more robust. The ELAC is a smaller speaker, has a smaller driver, but actually has quite a bit more bass. It's totally, without a doubt, a bass boosted speaker. The bass, again, for this price category, it's not going to be incredibly clean, tight, articulate, or have killer note-to-note distinction. In fact, it's somewhat monotone, but there's lots of bass. So if you're looking for a small speaker with a lot of bass, that's one cool thing about the ELAC BS41. Personally, I didn't love the boosted bass sound because it does come at the expense of quality. Moving up to the mid-range, both speakers were a neutral affair. I didn't find big differences in their mid-range. If anything, the ELAC might have been just a little bit more recessed in the mid-range region. Moving up to the treble, the Sony SS-CS5 takes an easy win because ELAC speakers, generally speaking, are hard to drive. And that's not something I like to see in the budget price category, but the Sony's way more effortless, way more clarity, easier to drive. They had just this like sense of ease to them when they were playing music that was easy on the ears. It was enjoyable, where the ELACs felt just a little bit more forced. The treble's nowhere near as refined, but it is still a decent speaker, especially for the money. So let's talk about how these performed for TV use, because I did use these upstairs in my living room. They performed admirably. They did a fine job. If you want to ditch a sound bar and instead go for a cheap pair of speakers like this paired to an affordable amp, I would recommend something like the Auralic A50. That bad boy is only $200. It's going to be clean. It's going to be clear. It's going to be a great match for speakers like this. It doesn't have a ton of power, so if you do want a similarly priced amp, but something that has a lot more power, check out this bad boy. I'm picking it up because I can't remember what it's called. This is the Fosse Audio DA2120C. I haven't reviewed it yet, but I did use it to test these speakers because this is the cheapest amp I have in-house. It's $179. Obviously, I used all my other amps, my Emotiva TA2, my Hagel H190, and my Kinky Studio separates. The Sony SS-CS5 sounded good on all my gear, but I did notice it scaled up quite a bit as I started to connect more and more expensive equipment to it. However, I will say the Auralic A50 and Sony SS-CS5 came shockingly close to like a higher end sound than I would ever expect for the money. So, oh, and real quick, do keep in mind, if you pick the Fosse amp over the Arylic, the Fosse doesn't have a built-in streamer, but it gives you more power. The Arylic has a built-in streamer, but it has a little bit less power. So I just wanted to make that clear if you were looking to put together a mini system in your living room and to replace a soundbar or to just have a good soundbar alternative, if you will. That's something that I'm actually very passionate about. I don't talk about it a lot, but I'm big on using like a pair of cheaper speakers and a cheaper amp in place of a soundbar. A decent soundbar, one that sounds decent, is like 500 bucks and up. And I think a pair of cheap speakers and a cheap amp are gonna give you a lot better sound. Anyhow, I digress. Maybe I'll do a video about that in the future because I've done a ton of setups upstairs in my living room with like 2.1 and 2.0. Anyway, I digress. Other comparisons. Compared to something like the Emotiva B1 Plus, that is a comparison I had planned originally because it was $249, but I saw recently Emotiva changed the price to $299. So they are now anywhere from 2 to 3 times the price, depending on what price these are. But let's do the comparison real quick so you guys can get an idea of what you get when you spend more. The Emotiva B1 Plus are going to be built to a much higher standard. They're going to have HDF cabinets and an AMT tweeter. They're going to have a much fuller sound. They have much stronger bass. They can play tremendously louder. So if you're thinking to use these in like a theater environment, for example, I would say maybe get something else, because one thing I noticed about the Sonys is they were great at low volumes and they certainly could play loud, but it wasn't their happy place. Whereas the Emotiva B1 Pluses, you know, Emotiva is a theater company. Their speakers can take a beating and they can play much louder than these Sonys can. The treble from the Emotivas is going to be a lot more higher end sounding. It's going to be a lot more refined. You're going to get a lot more detail retrieval and a lot more clarity. It's going to stage larger as well. Moving down to the mid-range, the Sony's mid-range is mostly neutral. The Emotiva B1's mid-range is just a little bit recessed. It's a little bit of a V-curve speaker. Anyway, I already told you the Emotiva B1 Plus had way more bass, so that kind of wraps up that comparison. As far as other cheaper speakers, like what are those cheap Daytons, the Airs, the B61 Airs? I can't remember what they're called anymore. I reviewed them a really long time ago. I think they're like $70 a pair. They're super cheap. These are way better. Those Dayton B652 Airs, that's what they were called. Great for the money. I think when they launched, they were like $55. But compared to the Sonys, the Dayton B652 Air is going to sound somewhat gritty by comparison. It's still a fairly balanced sound for the money, and that's why a lot of people like the Dayton, but the Sonys are just on another level as far as their clarity and detail retrieval and effortlessness to their presentation. Other cheap speakers, there's the Mica... God, I'm forgetting the name of all these cheap speakers. You guys know the cheap mica that's on Amazon. They're like, they're probably like 80 bucks, 100 bucks a pair now. Those are cool, but again, the Sonys are much better. The mic is really, God, I should not sit so close to the rack. I keep bumping it. Ruins my train of thought. The micas are going to be a lot brighter. They're going to be a lot more on the forward side of neutral. The Sonys are actually going to have the fuller sound. You can EQ either speaker, and I did notice the micas could take quite a beating when you boosted the bass with your tone controls. But you know, unless you need a really small speaker like the Mica, I think again the Sony SS-CS5 is going to be a much better option. It's going to give you a larger sense of scale, a larger sound field, a bigger sound stage, more width, height, and depth, and all those good things audiophiles love, and a lot better imaging also. So I'll be honest, I can't really think of any cheap speakers to compare this to. I do have the Triangle Bro 2s here. But I bought those used, and I have a sneaking suspicion they're not in the best shape because they don't sound anything like the Bro 3s I have here. And my understanding is Bro 3s and Bro 2s are supposed to sound almost the same. So we're not going to do that comparison. But, if the Bro 2s really do sound anything like the Bro 3s, you can find the Bro 2s on sale for about 200 bucks. And that is a fantastic speaker. I just don't want to do an exact sound comparison because, again, the pair I have here, I'm not convinced they're in 100% working condition. I think that brings us to a close, guys. Let's answer the question, are these a unicorn? I'm going to go ahead and say yes, because here's why. So these were giving me Focal Cora 806 vibes for $98 a pair. Now, these are nowhere near on the level of the Focal Cora 806. That's a $1,000 a pair speaker currently on sale. And it's better at literally everything. But the Focal Cora 806, that was my first experience with just a real low volume champion, where, you know, at lower volumes, you just had this like effortless clarity still, and it was awesome. And the Sonys, this is the first time I'm hearing that kind of sound at such a low price point. So yeah, totally a unicorn. Absolutely recommend them on sale for $98, $100. Still recommend them at $149 right now. And at full price, closer to $200. I still recommend them if you're a lower volume listener, but if you're looking to crank them a little bit louder, I do think it might make more sense to save a couple more dollars and get something like the Emotiva B1 Plus instead. Anyhow, with that said, that brings this video to a close. This YouTube channel does have a free Discord. Link is in the description below. If you join my free Discord, please don't be an asshole. Don't talk down to people. Don't ask people why they don't have a rug in their living room, even if they have hardwood or tile floor. Not everyone wants a rug in their living room. Living rooms are not 100% dedicated to sound for everyone either. Take it easy. Treat everyone with courtesy and respect like you would an old friend. If anything I said in this video offends you, I don't care. Your feelings are not my concern. See a therapist about that. And with that said, thank you for joining me. And by the way, thank you for 12,000 subscribers that we have now. That just happened yesterday. And until next time, later.